You've tuned in to the unavailing frequency. But don't touch that dial. We've got you right where we want you.
This is Leviathan, What Swims Beneath the Skin of the World, Part 4, What We Carry Home. They gave me a bunk over the lower deck of the HMAS Bundaberg, a patrol vessel out of Darwin that smelled of diesel and industrial cleaning solution and the specific institutional saltiness of a working military ship. And I lay in that bunk for 14 hours without sleeping and stared at the metal ceiling 18 inches above my face and listened to the engine and felt the movement of the water beneath the hull and thought about nothing successfully for the first time in 3 months. Not nothing in the sense of blankness, nothing in the sense of quiet. The specific quiet that comes after something enormous has passed through you and left the air behind it still. The quiet of the room after a storm has gone through it. Disordered, yes. Changed, yes. But also clarified. The way storm-washed air is cleared than what it was before it. My chest, which had housed the cold, dark thing for 3 months with a fidelity that I thought was only now beginning to understand, was a kind of terrible loyalty. It now felt not empty exactly. Emptied of something specific, the way a room feels after you've finally thrown out the furniture that never fit. But the hunger was not gone. And I need to be truthful about that. Because I think the story we prefer, the narrative of the transformative ordeal, the crucible that burns away the dross and leaves only the refined self, is seductive precisely because it is not quite true. And the not quite truth of it is where people begin to get into trouble. The hunger wasn't gone. The cold, dark thing was not destroyed completely. What had happened, floating on the fourth morning above the Leviathan's final descent, was not an exorcism. It was a recognition, a naming. And naming a thing is not the same as eliminating it, but is only the necessary first step. The step without which elimination is impossible, because you cannot put down what you cannot see. And I had finally, after 3 months and 3 days and 3 miles of dark water, seen it. I lay in the bunk and felt the ship move through that cold, dark Pacific water. I thought again about Bethany, what she had said to me. Tell someone you love them in a way that cost you something. Her final words. She said them like a person who'd figured out the most important thing and wanted to make sure that it got out of the water with someone. I thought about the particular courage of that. To spend your last second delivering a message rather than screaming. To look out at the dark water coming up through the surface and choose in that half second of understanding to give something rather than to take. That was the opposite of envy. It was the precise opposite. Envy is the last second impulse to grab, to hold, to take what the dying moment still contains. Bethany, who had been carrying her own particular failure of the soul, the failure to claim her own life, to move forward with what mattered, had in her last second what she chose, the thing her sin had prevented her from doing years before. She had given something freely and paid the cost without calculation. I thought about Gordon, who had already put his grief down. He'd found light still in the house and was walking toward it when the thing in the water made its calculation. Gordon, who had been, by Priya's analysis, the one among us who was no longer food, whose freedom was the thing that had drawn the creature's attention first, because whatever the Leviathan is, metaphor, monster, the living embodiment of accumulated human hunger, it knows the difference between a soul that is still carrying and a soul that has set down its burden. Gordon, who had gone peacefully, I told myself, who had been, for whatever it's worth, free when it took him. I didn't find as much comfort as this as I wanted to, but I held on to it because the other option was thinking about the water closing over him. And that option was not available to me in the bunk on the HMAS Bundaberg without becoming something I couldn't afford to become. Carson was in the medical bay, the ship's medic, a young woman from Adelaide who had the brisk, specific kindness of medical professionals who work in difficult environments. She had assessed him as physically intact but psychologically fragile enough to warrant monitoring, which was clinical language for the kid who went into the ocean voluntarily, and we want to make sure he doesn't do something like that again. I went to see him on the second day after I'd finally slept and eaten something and used the ship's satellite communication system to get a message to Meridian's emergency contacts that I was alive, which would trigger the chains of notification that would eventually reach Renata. He was sitting up in the medical bay cot, looking better than he had any right to look after what he had been through. The specific resilience of a 22-year-old, the body's extraordinary capacity at that age to process punishment and to continue. He had a bandage on his left forearm where the wreckage had cut him during the storm. He was eating crackers from a paper sleeve with the focused attention of someone who had rediscovered the miracle of ordinary food. "Hey," I said from the doorway. "Hey." He offered me the crackers, and I took one and sat in the chair beside his cot. We sat for a while without talking, which was comfortable in the way that the silences of people who've been through something together are comfortable, not empty, but loaded, full of shared reference points that don't require articulation. "I just kept seeing it," he said eventually. "The eye." "Yeah," I said. "It knew us," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "That's the part that I can't." He stopped. "I can handle the size of it. I can handle the fact that it exists. That something like that exists. I've been out here trying to surf waves that could kill me. I've got a relationship with scale and with things that could kill me." He turned the cracker sleeve over in his hands. "But the knowing, the fact that it looked at me and I felt like..." He stopped again. "Like it had read you," I said. "Yeah," he said. "Like it knew exactly what I was carrying." "It did," I said. I think it did. I think that's what it does." "What is it?" he asked. Simply, the way young people ask simple questions that older people have spent years learning to make complicated. I thought about how to answer that, about Priya's theory, the energy feeding, the emotional frequency, the thing that lives in the darkness and subsists on what we generate in it, about the book of Job and the chaos creature from the beginning of creation, pre-existing the ordered world, dwelling in the deep where order never had reached, about what Priya had said. In some versions, the reason the ocean exists is the Leviathan, the world built above it like a ceiling over a basement no one checks. "Envy," I said, "made real, made large. The hunger that lives in the dark and compounds over time." I paused. "Or at least that's one true thing about it. I think there might be more true things." Carson thought about that, ate a cracker. "Dante," he said, and I looked at him with the surprise that I immediately felt embarrassed about, and he said with a faint, tired smile, "I was an English major before I switched to business. First 2 years I read everything." He paused. "Second terrace, envy. The envious have their eyes sewn shut with wire because their sin was the failure of sight. Seeing others good as their own evil, refusing to look at the world clearly." I thought about the Leviathan's eye, the 12-foot phosphorescent eye looking at us with its particular consuming hunger. "It looks at us with our own hunger," I said. "That's what the eye is. It sees us with envy. It looks at us the way envy looks at everything, with wanting. The need to possess, with the hunger to take what the surface world has and bring it down. Into the dark, Carson said. Yeah, into the dark, I repeated. We sat with that for a while as the ship moved. The ocean moved beneath us, patient and enormous, to 95% doing what it had always done, existing, indifferent, containing what it contained. Jake's parents, I said. He looked at me. You said you were going back to see them. Yeah, he said, I think I am. Hold on to that, I said. Whatever the next weeks are like, and they're going to be bad, Carson. I've got to tell you, they're going to be bad. The next weeks are just, they're not going to be good. But hold on to the concrete things, the thing that you're going to do. The conversation with Jake's parents, and whatever the next thing after that is. He nodded. Something in his face resolved. Young and battered and more clear-eyed than he'd been when I'd found him on that debris field 3 days and a lifetime ago. Wyatt, he said as I stood to go. Yeah. What are you going to do when you get back? I thought about Renata, about Marcus, about standing in doorways with empty hands. The hard thing, I said. The thing that costs something. He nodded like he understood. I think he did. Pry and I talked on the deck on the evening of the second day, leaning on the rail, with the Pacific stretching behind us in the direction we had come from, the sky going through its late afternoon evolution of color, the flat iron gray finally breaking, and what felt like a kind of permission into a genuine sunset, the first one since the crash, orange and coral, the specific heartbreaking pink that only open ocean sunsets achieve, as though the sky felt it owed us something and was making a modest attempt at payment, some kind of apology. We'd been interviewed, both of us, by the ship's commanding officer and by a civilian from the Australian Maritime Safety Authority who had satellite linked to a larger investigation team. We'd given our accounts, we'd described the creature. I'd watched the faces of people receiving our description move through a sequence that I recognized, because I had made the same journey in reverse. The polite professionalism, the careful note-taking, the absence of direct skepticism that would be impolite, but the presence of its shadow in every response. The civilian from AMSA had asked 3 separate times whether or not we were certain of the scale of what we'd seen, phrasing it slightly differently each time, and each time Pryor had answered with the same precise, unflinching specificity. Dimensions, behavioral observations, pressure signature estimates, duration of sightings, number of witnesses, all of it delivered in the tone of a marine biologist presenting at a conference with the confidence of someone who knows that their credibility is the most important instrument they have and who has decided to use it without flinching. I'd ask what I could. Carson had added what he could. The report would be filed. It would go somewhere, into some database, reviewed by people with the expertise to assess it and the professional incentive to classify it as something manageable, a mass hallucination, misidentification of known species under stress, the psychological distortions of trauma survivors at sea. Something with a box to put it in, because boxes are what institutions do with the 95%. They label it unexplored and agree that unexplored means probably empty, because the alternative is looking at the ocean you've been building your civilization next to for millennia and acknowledging you don't know what's out there in it. I didn't blame them. I understand their impulse perfectly. They don't believe it, I said to Pry on the deck. No, she said. Will you publish? Write this up? She was quiet for a moment. I have a colleague at CSIRO who studies deep-sea bioluminescence. I have another at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, a research institute, and they work on deep-sea pressure dynamics. I have 3 years of field notes from the Vanuatu stations. She paused. I have our testimony, which is first-hand and unambiguous, and will be professionally catastrophic to attach my name to. But, I said, but Gordon is dead. Bethany is dead. 58 other people are dead. She looked at the sunset. Something did that. Something real and physical and present in the ocean. It did that. And the 95% isn't going to get better mapped by people who've decided in advance that it's empty. She would write it up. I knew it before she said so. That was who she was. The person who writes it up, who attaches her name to the uncomfortable data, who accepts the professional cost because the alternative is letting the uncomfortable data disappear. So what will you say? I asked. About what it is in the paper. She considered that. An unknown species, cephalopod or cetacean architecture most likely, given the pressure wave signature but with characteristics inconsistent with any known member of either group. Estimated scale indicated either a single organism or unprecedented size or... She stopped. Or a phenomenon that we don't have adequate scientific vocabulary for yet. That's honest, I said. It's all I have, she said. We watched the sunset, the ocean behind us enormous and patient, the water we had floated on for 3 days now, a distance away and receding somewhere in it, 3 miles down or more, the thing returning to its base and its trench, its unmapped blank of C4, carrying what it had taken and waiting for the patience of geological time for the next thing to come along that was carrying enough of the right kind of hunger. Priya, I said. Yes? Coral reef ecologist based in Vanuatu. I looked at the sunset. It's a long way from Perth, from a long way from everyone. Yes, she said. Is that... Are you going back to that? She was quiet for a long time. The pink in the sky deepened and then began to fade, the way best colors always do. The way things that cost the most to have are always the ones that don't last. I'm going to visit my parents first, she said, in Melbourne. I haven't been home in 14 months. She paused. And I'm going to call some people I stopped calling when the work got busy. And I'm going to go back to Vanuatu and do the work. Because the work matters, I'm good at it. But I'm going to do things differently. She paused again. Less alone. Good, I said. Yeah, it's the right thing to do. She said it with that flat precision that was her particular signature. It landed the way it always did, like a fact delivered without sentiment, but with complete conviction, the most Priya form of warmth. Thank you, I said, for everything you did out there. She looked at me with the slight surprise of someone who has not been thanked recently enough. You too, she said, and then, Wyatt, put it down. Whatever's still up when you get home, put it down before it. She stopped, looked at the water. Before it finds you again. Leviathan, I said, follows us home. Envy, she said. Envy never left. I landed in Portland on a Tuesday. Not the Tuesday of the conference room, a different Tuesday. 17 days after the crash, released from the Darwin hospital where I'd spent 9 days, and then the transit agreement that the investigation team required before they'd let the surviving passengers disperse back into their lives. 17 days of debriefings and medical assessments and conversations with the NTSB investigators who were collaborating with Australian authorities on the crash investigation. The grief counselors, the airline's insurers had provided with the aggressive efficiency of people managing liability, and the journalist who'd found the hotel. 3 survivors of a major Pacific crash. That's a story that moved units, it gets clicks, and who'd I declined to speak to, all of them, with the exception of one brief statement. I said was grateful to be alive. My thoughts were with the families of those we'd lost, which was true and insufficient, but it was the best I could do. Renata had called within hours of the initial notification that I was alive before I'd had a chance to reach her, the airline's emergency contact protocol having worked as designed. I'd taken the call in the ship's communications room, sitting in an institutional chair with the satellite phone heavy in my hand, the sound quality intermittent and slightly unreal. And I heard her voice and felt something in my chest that was not the cold, dark thing. It was not the hunger. Something that was the opposite of those things. Something warm and real and painful. Precisely ordinary. "Wyatt," she said, just the way she said it, the specific, unrepeatable sound of my name in her voice, the relief in it, naked and complete and without any of the management that ordinary phone calls have. It told me more than anything, she said after. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm alive. I'm okay." "I know, they told me. I know, She stopped, a sound I'd never heard from her. I just needed to hear you say it." "I'm saying it," I said. We talked for 12 minutes before the connection deteriorated. There had been nothing efficient or composed about either of us. Renata had cried and then apologized for crying and then cried again, which was the most completely real I had heard her be in months. I sat in the communications room of an Australian patrol vessel and felt the hunger in my chest, looking at that realness and trying by old reflex to audit it, and then feeling it fail. The machinery stalling. The cold, dark thing attempting to run its calculations and finding that the inputs had changed. The data set had fundamentally been altered by 72 hours of water and darkness and the eye of the Leviathan looking at me with my own face. I could not audit her grief anymore. I couldn't find the evidence against her and her crying on a satellite phone over a man she'd thought was dead. I'd let her cry. I had said his name, Copernicus, because she'd said she'd been keeping him with her, that she'd brought him to the studio every day, that she'd been talking to him. It was absurd, but she'd been talking to a dog about whether I was going to be okay. And the specific absurdity of that, the warmth of it, the intimacy of a woman talking to a golden retriever about the man she loved, had gone through the cold, dark thing like light through ice. I told her I was coming home, and she said she would be there, and that was enough. For 17 days of debriefings and grief counselors and journalists and medical assessments, that was enough. Portland received me the way Portland receives everything. The gray skies and the smell of rain and the particular Pacific Northwest light that is soft and diffuse, and that I've always found, even on its most overcast days, more comforting than sunshine in most other places. The city looked like itself. The airport looked like itself. The cab to Woodstock neighborhood moved through traffic on the 205 and then down Powell and then through the familiar streets of the neighborhood, past the coffee shop on the corner and the bookstore and the park where I walked Copernicus on Sunday mornings, and all of it was exactly as I had left it. Because, of course it was. Because the world doesn't rearrange itself to mark the things that happen to you. And this is both its cruelty and its mercy. The bungalow, the porch light was on. Though it was 2 p.m, the maple in the front yard that I'd planted the first spring we'd arrived there was taller now, the leaves just beginning their autumn turn, the front door opening before I'd made it up the porch steps, Copernicus erupting through the gap with the full-body ecstasy of a golden retriever who's been informed by the universe that something very important is about to happen and has decided to meet it at maximum velocity. He hit me at the top of the porch step with both front paws and approximately 70 pounds of joyful conviction. I grabbed him. I sat down on top of the porch step. I held my dog, and he conducted his full forensic investigation of my 17 days. Every new smell, every story, the salt air, the ship's diesel, it was all written into my clothes and skin. and he did it with the thoroughness of love that has no language but touch. Renata stood in the doorway. She looked the same, yet she looked different. The same in that objective documentary sense. The same dark hair, same asymmetric cut, the same eyes that I've been trying to describe accurately for 3 years, have never quite managed. A brown that is sometimes green and sometimes gold depending on the light, the kind of eyes that require multiple visits. The difference was harder to quantify. She looked like someone who had spent 17 days with the fact she couldn't manage or project manage or organize into something more comfortable, and who had consequently become slightly more present, more immediate, specifically there, than the version of her I had been leaving for the airport, which had been slightly managing me, slightly composed, slightly performing the right kind of send-off for a business trip. But this was not that. This was real. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said from the porch step with Copernicus redistributing his weight across my lap. She came and sat on the step beside me, not facing me, beside me, which is how she does things, which is the side-by-side approach that I've always loved about her. The preference for shared orientation over confrontation. We looked at the maple in the front yard, the street, the ordinary Tuesday afternoon of the Woodstock neighborhood, and Copernicus accepted his new configuration as normal, settled his entire body across both of our laps with the magnificent presumption of dogs, and we sat like that for a few minutes without saying anything. "I brought you home," she said finally, very quietly. I looked at her. "When I thought you were..." She stopped. "When they told me the plane was down and before they confirmed survivors, I just kept..." She stopped again and pressed her lips together, and then I just kept thinking, bring him home. Whatever the universe is, whatever is out there, bring him home. And there it was. That was the whole cathedral, built from 3 words and the name, "Can't Wait To," and Marcus. And here was the foundation of it, the actual thing it had been built on. She had asked the universe to bring me home. Not Marcus, not anyone else, me. I'd spent 3 months building the verdict in the dark, and the foundation, the whole construction rested on this, that she had asked the universe to bring me home, and the universe, or something, had. The cold dark thing made one more attempt, a last faint signal, a ghost of the cathedral, a brief flicker of the machinery starting up, and then I put it down. Not dramatically, not with any of the ceremony that the enormity of the gesture seemed to require, simply the way you put something down when you've been carrying it too long and your arms finally fully give it out. I put it down. "Renata," I said. "Yeah?" "I need to tell you something." I looked at the maple, the leaves turning. "I need to tell you something that is going to make me sound like exactly the kind of person I don't want to be. I'm going to tell you anyways, because I think you need to deserve the honest account. And because I think I've been giving you a performed account for the last 3 months, and that isn't..." I stopped and started again. "You deserve the real one." She was quiet, listening. The specific quality of her listening, which I've always known meant she was taking something in rather than preparing her response. She was taking it in. "I've been running a prosecution," I said, "in my head, since the summer mixer, since you met Marcus." I paused. "I've been collecting evidence and inventing evidence for a verdict I reached about you and him on almost no actual information. I've been auditing your love, every look, every time you said his name, every pause before an answer. I've been treating you like a suspect." I paused again. "And the worst part is that I knew I was doing it. I knew the evidence was manufactured. I knew the verdict was predetermined, and I kept doing it anyway, because the fear of losing you was less manageable than the certainty of having already lost you, even if the certainty was false. That's not love. That's what envy does to love. That's what I've been doing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I needed you to know that. The maple, the street, Copernicus breathing his deep, contented dog breath across both our laps. Renata was quiet for a long time, long enough that the discomfort of it became its own form of honesty. She was not managing the silence, she was genuinely in it, processing the thing I'd put on the table. Marcus, she said finally. Yes. The text. She said it with a directness that told me she knew what I was talking about, that she had noticed the notification, had perhaps even suspected. Yeah, I saw 3 words in your name for him in my contact, and I built a conviction, I said. She exhaled slowly. It was about a birthday surprise for you. Your birthday's in October. I've been asking him for suggestions. He works with you. He knows what you'd like. Because I was trying to plan something. The gallery show I'd mentioned, there was an artist friend of mine whose opening was going to be around your birthday. And I wanted to know if you'd actually want to go to that or whether I should look at something else. She paused. That was it. The whole thing, a birthday party I've been planning for a month. And I sat with that. I sat with it and felt the cathedral come down, not with any fanfare, not with the crash and drama that the size of the construction might have implied, just down, the way something that was never structurally sound eventually comes down, quietly and in stages and with a slight sense of embarrassment that it was ever up at all. I know, I said, because I did. Because some part of me had always known, the part that the cold dark thing had been working so hard to suppress. I know, that doesn't make the thing that I've been doing okay. No, she said gently, it doesn't. I know. She turned and looked at me full face, the eyes that require multiple visits. You almost died, she said. Yeah. And you came home and the first thing you did was tell me the worst thing about yourself. Bethany told me to, I said, which made no sense out of context and which I would explain later in the long evening ahead over the lemongrass soup she'd already made me in advance on my arrival, because of course she had. When I would tell her the full story, all of it, the crash and the water and the 5 of us and Gordon and Carson and Bethany's last words and Priya and the thing in the ocean, and she would listen the way she listens, taking it in, and she would cry twice and I would let her. Bethany told you to, she repeated. She said. I stopped. The loss of Bethany, which I had been managing with the same distance I'd been applying to everything, hit me suddenly and fully. The way delayed grief hits you when you finally created something, the safety allows it to arrive. She said to tell you that I love you in a way that cost me something. Renata looked at me for a long moment, then she took my hand, both of hers around mine, the same grip she uses for the coffee mug, thumbs overlapping, fingers wrapped completely in warm and real and freely given. It's going to take me some time to trust the account, to... You know what I mean. I believe you mean it, but trust isn't... I know, I said. I know what trust is, and I know what it's not. I looked at our hands. I'm not asking you to be fine. I'm asking you to know the real one, to have this honest account. I paused. What you do with it, that's up to you. She squeezed my hand. October is a month away, she said. Yes. The gallery show is on the 14th. Okay. You'd hate it, she said with the smile that reaches her eyes, the real one. It's all abstract ceramics and people in expensive glasses saying liminal. You'd be miserable. I would be so miserable, I said. I'll look at something else. Please. Copernicus made a sound of deep satisfaction and adjusted his weight. We sat on the porch step in the gray Tuesday afternoon and held hands and looked at the maple tree and the turning leaves, and I breathed the Pacific Northwest air, the Douglas fir and the rain, cold and clean, entirely unlike the ocean, and I felt the emptied space in my chest where the cold dark thing had lived. Not gone, not cured. The hunger would come back. Hunger always comes back, but it would be different. Visible now. Named. And a named thing can be put down when you feel it starting to build. Can be seen for what it is before the cathedral goes back up. Can be caught in the early stages rather than the full elaborate conviction. That was the work. That was what the ocean had cost me. Not just the days on the water, not just Gordon and Bethany and the 58 others, but the comfortable darkness of my own interior. The work now was to live in the light that the absence of comfortable darkness makes available, which is less comfortable and more honest and harder, but better. I went to see Marcus on Thursday, not to have a confrontation, not the righteous reclamation I had imagined in my worst moments on the water, when the cold dark thing had rehearsed 100 versions of the scene that would end with Marcus publicly exposed, professionally destroyed, and me standing in the ruins of his credibility with my arms crossed. That's what Envy's script was, not mine. I put the script down with everything else. I knocked on the open door of his office, which was one floor above mine and had a better view of the river, which he had mentioned to me exactly once and which I had mentally cataloged as evidence, which it wasn't. He was standing at his standing desk with his headphones around his neck and his half-eaten lunch pushed to one side, and he saw me, and something moved across his face, quickly, then managed. That was the part that surprised and genuinely relieved me, and I thought, the specific of guilt, of someone who has known on some level that they've been getting away with something. Wyatt! He said, Jesus, you're alive. I said, yeah. I heard, I got the notification, obviously, when the plane went down, and then when they confirmed survivors and said you were one of them, He stopped. Oh man, how are you? I'm working on it, I said, which was true. Marcus, can I sit down? He nodded, and I sat in the chair across from his standing desk, and he pulled his standing desk over, and he sat on the stool, which was a specific accommodation, making himself lower, making the conversation level that I noted without cataloging as anything. The Tanaka Project, I said. He exhaled. It was a very quiet exhale, barely audible, but I heard it. Yeah, he said. The presentation to Fitch, I said, the quarterly review. You used the first person singular throughout. A pause. He had the grace not to immediately reach for the defense. Oh man, I know, he said. That framework was mine, I said. The methodology, the survey analysis, the Kyoto relationship, that was me. The executive summary was yours, and it was excellent, and I told you that. The market analysis was yours, but the rest was mine. And you presented it in a way that made that invisible. I know, he said again, quieter. Well, I should have said something then, I said. But I didn't, and that's on me. So I'm saying it now. I paused. I am the lead on the Tanaka project. I need that to be reflected in how this project is presented. Internally to the partners, to the Tanaka team going forward. I need to be the first author on the deliverables. I need to be the point of contact with Dr. Tanaka's team. And I need you to acknowledge in the next partner level communication that the project framework and methodology are mine. I paused. That's what I'm asking. He looked at me, something working behind his eyes, the calculation that confident people run when they're caught, the assessment of which version of themselves to deploy, whether it's cheaper to minimize or to acknowledge. I watched it happen and felt no satisfaction, which surprised me. I had imagined satisfaction. What I felt was something quieter, something like the completion of a sentence that had been left unfinished for too long. "Yeah," he said. "Okay, yeah. And then, Wyatt, you don't need to," I said. Whatever you're going to say, you don't need to." I stood up. "This is the conversation I should have had with you 3 months ago, and now we've had it. We'll figure out the rest." "Wyatt," he said again, and I stopped because something in the quality of it was different than the professional management of the previous exchanges. "I heard what happened out there. I heard." He stopped. "Man, I'm just glad you're back. I'm glad you came back." I looked at him. Marcus Hale, 31-year-old, magazine jaw, effortless confidence, genuinely good at his job, genuine and probably unconsciously willing to take more than his share when no one was watching. A person with whatever he carried, whatever version of the cold dark thing he'd been given, whatever hunger drove that behavior I'd spent 3 months building a cathedral around. Not a monster. Never a monster. "Yeah, me too," I said. The Tanaka project delivered in February. The final report carried my name first, Dr. Wyatt Drake, lead analyst, and Marcus's second, with clear attribution of the methodology and framework in the executive summary that Robert Fitch read. He read the methodology and approved without comment, which was his way of acknowledging something without having to say it out loud. Dr. Aiko Tanaka sent me a personal email after the delivery in the precise and generous English that she always used in our written communications, saying that the work was outstanding and that she'd hoped we would have occasion to collaborate again. I read the email on a Saturday morning on the back porch of the bungalow with a mug of coffee, and I held it with both hands, thumbs overlapping. Copernicus was moving through the yard. The October gallery show had been replaced with a weekend in a rented house on the Oregon coast, a place with a wood-burning fireplace and a view of the Pacific that Renata had found and booked and described to me over dinner with the specific, slightly tentative excitement of someone trying a new approach to something. The weekend had been what she'd hoped. The fire and the view and the long walks on the beach where the Pacific looked entirely different from a shore than it did from the surface. Manageable, beautiful, correctly proportioned. And I stood at the water's edge one morning while Renata slept in, and Copernicus investigated the tide pool, and I'd looked at the ocean. And I thought about what was in it. I thought about Gordon's granddaughter, who'd been born in November, a girl, which he had not lived to know, 7 pounds 4 ounces, named Harriet, after his wife. Carson had sent me a message the month before to tell me he had been to see Jake's parents in Columbus, that it had been hard and necessary, and that Jake's mother had hugged him for a long time in their front doorway, and had said she was glad he came. Priya had sent me a paper, pre-publication, 43 pages, meticulous and clear-eyed and fully signed with her name at the top. She titled Anomalous Organism Encounter in the Melanesian Basin, a first-hand account and preliminary biological framework, and which would be published the following spring to the exact professional reception she had predicted, a mixture of serious attention from a small community and a wider dismissal, and which she submitted anyway, with the equanimity of someone who had made peace with what things cost. I looked out at the ocean, the 95%, the vast, unmapped dark below the surface of the world, containing what it contained, ancient and pressurized and patient, containing that blank bathmeridic survey, the blank that was now annotated in the digital files of the AMSA investigation, with a notification that would take years to be fully examined and would probably never be what anyone else wanted it to be, containing the Leviathan. I'd stood in the water's edge in that October morning, Copernicus in the tide pool, and I had felt not the cold dark thing which was present but quiet, dormant, the way hunger is quiet when it is recently fed on something real. What I felt was something I can only call respect. The specific respect of a man who has looked at something enormous and old and dangerous, and has been looked back at with his own hunger magnified to geological scale, and who has survived not because he was strong enough to defeat it, but because he was honest enough finally to stop feeding it. The Leviathan had not been defeated. It had descended. It had returned to its trench, its basin, its 3 miles of dark, to wait. It was waiting now as I stood at the shore with my coffee, as it had always waited, as it would always wait, because it was older than patience itself and it didn't need to hurry. It had been there before the first human being looked at the ocean and decided that it looked safe, and it would be there after the last one. But it had not taken me, and I was here on the shore in that October morning, with the coffee and the dog and the woman inside still sleeping, the bungalow behind me with it restored, its windows, its finished floors, the maple in the front yard turning its last colors before the fall, and the ordinary Tuesday of my life waiting past the weekend to be lived differently, honestly, and with the cost paid in full. That was enough. That was beginning to understand everything. There's one more thing I need to tell you, and I need to be honest because the honest account is the whole point. And because I promised myself sitting on the porch step with Renata's hands around mine, that the honest account was the only one I would give from now on. 2 months after I came home, I had a dream. I was in the water, the South Pacific, the same stretch, the same gray pewter morning, but I was alone. No wreckage, no debris field, no survivors, just me, treading water in the middle of the ocean, in the vast blue-gray of the Pacific. It was open, the horizon empty in every direction, the sky low and cloud-covered, and the water very, very deep beneath me. And it came up, slowly, the way it had always done, the gradual darkening beneath the surface, the thermal shift, the pressure wave. It rose from the 3-mile dark with the patience of something that has all of the time in the world. It rose until the great phosphorescent eye was level with the surface, 6 feet from me, looking at me across the short distance of the water with its ancient, cold, consuming hunger. And I looked back. In the dream I was not afraid, but I'm not going to tell you why, because I don't entirely know why. Except the naming of things has a power that I didn't fully understand before the Pacific. And I had named this thing. And the named thing was different from the unnamed thing in the specific way that fear of the known is different from fear of the unknown. Still real, still enormous, but contained by language in a way it hadn't been before. I looked back at the eye that looked at me. And then I said in the dream out loud on the surface of the ocean, in a voice that the water absorbed without returning an echo. I said, I see you, and I know what you are, and you're not getting back in. The eye held me, the hunger in it, immense and old and genuinely terrible. It pressed against me with all its geological weight. And then slowly, it descended. The light of the eye dimming as it went, moving away from the surface, backing toward the dark, back toward the 95%, back to the trench where the world does not go. And I woke up in the bungalow bedroom, Renata asleep beside me on her side facing away, which is simply how she sleeps. The gray Portland morning beginning its slow illumination of the curtains, Copernicus at the foot of the bed, audibly dreaming. And I lay there and breathed, and the dream faded the way dreams do, and the ordinary morning assembled itself around me with its coffee and its light and its restorative, complete, magnificent ordinariness. The hunger was there, quiet in my chest. I acknowledged it. I named it. I put it down, and I got up, and I went to make the coffee.